Good morning. All right, and it's actually great to follow the conversation with Dawn because a lot of what I want to talk about today is breaking down silos and sustaining and scaling. Because I'll share one observation. I'm going to put out a thought. When we talk about innovation, the art of the possible, there's an amazing amount of innovation going on across the entire federal government. And I have the opportunity to work across the DoD, the IC, and all of our civilian agencies and see that innovation everywhere. What we have to get right, and what was a point that was made by both of our first two speakers, is how we sustain and scale that. And we industrialize it. And it's not just a project. It is an ongoing discipline, and we change the pace at which we move. So thank you for the opening, and mission, service, stewardship, those are the cornerstones of the President's management agenda. We did just pass the first year anniversary, and how we enhance the ability of every single agency to achieve mission, how we provide better services to citizens, and that we, in all things, are prudent users of taxpayer dollars. Those are also the reasons why driving innovation and really getting it right is so vital today. So in preparing for today's discussion, the team asked me to share ways that innovation is empowering the mission and how we're taking action to solve some of those most complex problems. But I want to share with you some of the things that fit into that space of great ideas, but we have to sustain and scale. Some of them that I'm going to share are fairly small. Some are kind of in the middle of their life cycle. But that's where there's a lot of the challenges. You saw some of the charts that Dawn shared around what that innovation curve looked like. That's why the partnership with industry is so important. I came to the federal government after about 3 decades in private sector. In industries where things like natural language processing, that's SOP in customer service centers. Some of these technologies and platforms at scale globally, that's how private sector industry operates. And those are some of the things that we have the opportunity to seize and make leaps and bounds, not just small steps forward. So to talk about and share some of those ideas, I'm going to use the framework of the PMA on IT modernization, data accountability, and transparency. But as you listen to the examples, I'm going to ask you to constantly keep in mind that these are some of the sparks. And the real challenge, the heavy lifting, is sustaining that spark and industrializing what we're learning to bigger, broader enterprise value. Because innovation is not a passing concept of that one great idea. It requires that we invest in the people skills and that we empower innovation through mature lab-to-market processes and platforms that we talked about at the beginning that take those great sparks and turn them into enterprise capabilities, not just this great thing that this one team has in a little silo. I'll also share, as I came into government, that innovation is not always easy, especially in some areas. And as I was preparing, it made me think of this cartoon. Since it's the morning, I thought I'd share it with you for a little bit of chuckle. When we're talking about new ideas, everyone's really excited. And then when we get in and say, okay, but this is what we have to do with the acquisition process, and this is what we have to do with our business process teams, and this is what we have to do with general counsel, and people start, We have to get through that. We have to change the processes that surround what we're doing while we're trying to move that idea. So improving the pace of innovation and modernization has been one of the focus areas of the administration. That's why there's been so much energy around reducing regulatory burden, updating outdated technology policy. That's what I spent a lot of my first year doing. Taking the chains and barriers away so that we can use commercially available technology for modernization. As we were talking about before the session, bringing with it security, digital capabilities. and many things that 3 decades ago weren't in the art of the possible. They weren't imaginable, but they are now. And we can pick up those things as part of our modernization effort. One of the things when I have come into this role, I'll share a personal story. People ask me sometimes, are you having fun? I think that's a really interesting question. Because when you are passionately focused on driving change and sustaining innovation, you're asking people to do things differently. And that's not always fun. It sometimes feels like this. It sometimes feels like a full contact sport. But what is fun and feels a lot more like this is when we, as a collective community, can take technology and improve citizen experience with the government. We can solve the complex problems. We can take paper-based, time-consuming things and turn it into a couple of clicks. We can leverage our data to find cures for disease. And we enable first responders to save lives. Those are all real examples. Those are all real examples of things that happened last year. That's what fun looks like. So now I'm going to drill down on a couple of those examples that I would ask you to think about, and I'm going to use one of the comments that Dawn made as well. Some of the things that we are doing, whether it's on the civilian side, the DoD, or in the IC community, when we do those at scale, and when we drive innovation and engage with our industry partners, there's a greater good on behalf of the whole, not only of the federal government, but the nation that we serve. And I'm going to focus a little bit when I talk about making data available. And as I share some of these examples, on the process side, across the CIO community, we have ongoing initiatives, not just to spur the innovation that I'm going to share, but to sustain and scale those innovative programs. And the ability to sustain and scale is a direct outcome from our investment, not only in industrializing the processes and robust workflow capabilities, but the investments that we're making in people. And the investments that we're making in skills and new business models. So the CIOs, OMB, and GSA's TTS team are united in our focus on how we're building some of those specific capabilities at scale, because that's going to help sustain us. So I'm going to hit some innovations in these areas. So we fight the cyber battle every day, right? We talked about that. On April 11th, we began moving forward, taking action on establishing the Federal Acquisition Supply Chain Council as part of the legislation that passed at the end of last year. And the law established a unified whole of government approach to how we protect the supply chain. Last week, let me talk about what we did on the people side. Last week, the CIO Council and Department of Education kicked off a Cyber Rescaling Academy. It's 30 people, but it's a different concept and an innovative process to take capable, informed mission, domain knowledge, we have to domain knowledge individuals and give them cyber skills to help us fight the battle. That's an example of innovation on the people side to sustain our ongoing needs in the cyberspace. For all my media friends in here, I will also say the second cohort actually was announced while we were sitting here. So that is actually lit up on CIO.gov. Our second reskilling set of activities is kicking off. We have more that are following. And that's the way that we're reinvesting and ensuring that in all the things that we're doing on the technology side, we're making an investment in the people side on the cyber side. So, let's see. That's the first Rescaling Academy. I thought I'd share their smiling faces. And those individuals actually represent, they represent 11 different agencies and people across all different areas, and every one of them was a non-IT professional. And some of them scored extremely high on the test. Non-IT professionals moving over into the cyberspace. So modernization, what are some of the sparks? What are some of the things of innovation? We have multiple agencies that right now We've been focused on moving to cloud email. Why? And by the way, we were in the low percentages. Now we're almost there. We're focusing on the last few agencies bringing it home. Why? That was the place to start. To get their hands around understanding, operating in that environment so that we can move more aggressively for full application rationalization. And as I talk to many of the agencies and look at their entire stack and what their whole application portfolio looks like, somewhere between 45 to as much as 75% could be moved to the cloud. Now we have to do it. But getting email moved was important to build our skills, to understand what it means, to start to recognize the capabilities. And now, across both the DoD and the civilian agencies, we're focused on the collaboration tools and what's next. Now that we've gotten the first piece, what's the second piece, and how do we move through and rationalize our applications and aggressively move? And about a third of the agencies have done broader application rationalization. And now we just have to turn the fire on. Talk about data centers. As we have been moving through and consolidating, GAO actually confirmed, that's good when GAO confirms that you've done something, confirm that we've made progress. But now we have to continue moving and making progress on how we operate and what that looks like and how we drive more consolidation and shared operations. I wanted to share another thing that as we looked last week, Meritalk actually reported the Internet Society's Online Trust Alliance released a trust and audit report and an honor roll. And it found that the federal government entities were the most improved. How often have you heard that? Don't hear that very often, but with 91% improving our .gov properties. That's real results focused on, or coming from agencies who are focused on modernization, and they understand the power of data. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about data. So there's so many areas where data is accelerating mission inside the government, improving citizen services, facilitating research, decreasing manual data aggregation tasks, and improving our financial diligence. But one of the things that we have to do to keep building that spark is put more discipline around how we protect the data, how we manage privacy, how we maintain citizen trust by that transparency of what are you gathering it for, what are you using it for, how are you analyzing it. But we also have to make the big investments in the people side. So last year, at the end of the year, the Foundations of Evidence-Based Policy Making passed, and that called for establishment of chief data officers. And those chief data officers have a set of activities that are rooted in how we not only make data available, but we use it to solve the unsolvable question. I think that was one of the points around this. What are the unsolvable questions? And so to deliver on that challenge, we have people work to do across all of our agencies, not only to empower our data professionals, but to ensure that there's the collaboration and coordination between our technology professionals, data, privacy, and our evidence-based team. And only through that collective collaboration will we be able to move very quickly into the things that we do, the foundation around data, and a big part of the purpose is so that we can leverage advanced technologies, as we talked about, around automated technology. So those of you, many of you have seen a lot of information and a lot of sharing lately about progress in RPA. What we're doing on the robotics side, particularly across many of the civilian agencies. It's been going on in the DoD and the IC for a long time, and it's part of the food chain, right? As we build the muscles to understand and put the discipline in our data and the transparency and thought and examination into automated technologies, we have opportunity to use more and more advanced technologies. We have bots across 35 agencies. When I reflect on what that means, like from a private sector side and coming out of a global corporation, that's a teeny tiny drop in the bucket. So we have a lot of opportunity that's not touched. And I would put forth that this is one of our biggest areas for innovation and scale. But it's also very important for collaboration. Because our challenge is not only how do we use those capabilities to serve mission, but how do we share with the citizens that we're serving what we're doing, why we're doing it, in a way that's understandable. It's a common theme that Dawn talked about, but that's not a simple task. And those are muscles that we have to build across all the agencies. And so that's why one of the pushes from OMB and across the CIO Council is to just get started. It may be a pilot, it may be a few projects, but that's how we get moving. One of the more exciting things that we're doing is we have a community of interest that is set up for use of automated technologies being led by the mission-serving individuals, the mission servers. So it's a technology pull. That's pretty exciting. For those of you in the room who are technologists, it's great when you have your mission partners come and say, hey, I want some of that. I understand what that means. I understand how that drives value. Let me help you drive that change. That's a great partnership. And that's what we want to do more of. So there's a mission value pull when the value is clear. So every single topic I've hit, I've talked about workforce. I'm going to end with a couple of additional workforce things. Across each of the areas I touched on, cloud, advanced technologies, whether that's RPA, AI, or the broad spectrum of data science and the combination of transparency and privacy, we're making significant investments in the people areas there as well. Those will be some of the things that you'll see not only for reskilling, but very specific investments that are going to be headed up by certain agencies as well as supported across the CIO Council. We're also working on how we build some of those skills in conjunction with our national labs. And when we look at the capabilities that we already have in taking innovation and big ideas from those environments and lab to market, how we can leverage those learnings to move faster. And those are some things that you'll see in May and June timeframe. So in Wrapup, I tried to share some highlights of innovation across all the areas that you see here. But those are sparks. And the ask of this community, I'm going to echo some of the same things. Our challenge is to break down the silos, to sustain innovation, but to scale. And to scale, we have to work collaboratively with our partners in industry to ensure that the accomplishments and the great ideas of today don't burn out and dwindle. But it's a process, and it is a capability that we build going forward. So cyber, IT modernization, data, automated technologies, no surprises. These are all continued delivery on the results of the President's management agenda. And as you think about the technology investments in every one of these areas, please ensure that our people investments are moving in lockstep. Again, that's the only way that we sustain. And it's the only way that we will grow at the pace that we need to. So even though I shared some of the things that are from early stages, and there's a lot of work to be done, we've started. And step by step, by very intentional step, we have the opportunity to scale. And that's the challenge that I want to leave and ask of the individuals in this room. And as you're making your investment here today and listening, think about, how am I going to scale that idea? How am I going to ensure that I have the team that can support operating broadly? There was a statement made in the framing of today's session as well, the unsolvable questions. I hope you leave with the confidence that there may be questions that are unsolvable today, at this very point in time, But your efforts, your contributions, and if we stay on this journey together, those things will not be unsolvable in the near future. Who envisioned 2 decades ago, some of these systems I'm digging into now, two decades ago, what capabilities we would have in the palm of our hand with the phone? Who could have imagined some of the things that we're talking about right now? Those things were unsolvable. And that's a very simple example of the art of the possible. So I appreciate all of our sponsors who made it possible for you to sit here, to think, to hopefully be inspired, to connect with others who are breaking down silos, who are finding successful ways to scale, and can support you in that journey. And I hope that today expands your thoughts and does inspire you to the art of the possible. And thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. Thank you, sir.